The wedding invitation arrived while I was warming 3 bottles at 2 in the morning. Under the printed address, Evan had written, "I hope you finally learned to be happy for other people." Before I could finish reading it, one of my daughters spit warm milk down the sleeve of my Ohio State sweatshirt. That was how Evan's grand attempt to ruin my night began. Not with tears, not with me collapsing against the kitchen counter. With sour formula running toward my elbow. I stood there in our small kitchen in Westerville, Ohio, wearing compression socks and slippers, while 3 glass bottles clicked softly against the side of a saucepan. Daniel was asleep on the living room couch with Nora on his chest. June had finally stopped crying. Lucy, the one who had spit up on me, was staring at the ceiling fan like it had personally offended her. I should have thrown the invitation away. Instead, I read his note 3 times. 2 years earlier, Evan Mercer had ended our engagement in the parking garage beneath Riverside Methodist Hospital. I was 41 then. He was 42. We had been together almost 4 years and engaged for 9 months. We had reserved a ballroom at a hotel in Dublin, put down deposits with a photographer and caterer, and spent Sunday afternoons driving through Powell looking at houses we could not quite afford. Evan talked about children often. He wanted 2, a boy first if possible, though he always laughed afterward and said he knew people could not order babies like lunch. His mother, Judith, did not laugh. She talked about the Mercer line, as though Evan came from European royalty instead of a family that owned a successful office furniture business outside Columbus. When my periods became irregular, I blamed stress and age. I had been handling a payroll software conversion at Buckeye Fresh Distribution, and I was sleeping 5 hours a night. Still, after 6 months of trying to get pregnant, I made an appointment at a fertility clinic. The doctor was a calm woman with silver-framed glasses. She spoke slowly, which I appreciated because Evan had a habit of interrupting professionals the moment he thought he understood them. She explained that my ovarian reserve was lower than expected, and that one fallopian tube appeared partially blocked. "My chances of conceiving naturally are reduced," she said, "but reduced is not the same as 0. I remember that sentence clearly. Evan apparently remembered only one word. "So she's infertile?" he asked. The doctor turned toward him. "Infertility is a broad diagnosis. It does not mean pregnancy is impossible. IVF may still be an option." Evan leaned back in his chair. "Not much, maybe 2 inches. But I felt it. We had both completed testing, though not all the results had been reviewed yet. The doctor told us the clinic would call after the final lab work was processed. In the elevator, Evan stared at the floor numbers. He did not touch my hand. By the time we reached the parking garage, he was already talking like our life had become a bad investment. "I'm 42, Claire," he said. "I can't spend years chasing something that may never happen. We just got the first set of results." She said IVF. She said we had options. He opened his car door but did not get in. "I don't want my whole marriage to become doctor visits, injections, and disappointment." I stared at him. "You said you wanted a family with me." "I do want a family." There are sentences that take a second to hurt because your mind tries to protect you from what they mean. I asked him, "With me?" He looked toward the concrete wall instead of answering. Then he removed the key to my condo from his key ring and placed it in the cup holder. That was it. No long argument, no final embrace, no promise to call after we had both calmed down. Just a small brass key sitting beside an old parking receipt. "What about your test results?" I asked. "They were fine. We haven't even had the follow-up. My numbers were normal." He said it quickly. Too quickly, though I did not recognize that at the time. I drove back to my condo in Worthington with both hands tight on the steering wheel. I do not remember the radio station or the traffic. I only remember missing my exit and realizing I had been driving south for almost 15 minutes. Judith arrived that evening. She brought 2 reusable grocery bags filled with Evan's clothes, phone charger, shaving kit, and the gray sweater I had bought him for Christmas. She remained in the doorway. "I'm sorry it ended this way," she said. Her tone suggested she was sorry about the inconvenience. "The doctor never said I couldn't have children. Claire, Evan has always wanted a family." "So did I." At his age, he cannot spend years hoping a doctor changes her mind. The doctor didn't change her mind. You weren't there. Judith gave me the patient expression she usually saved for servers who brought her salad dressing on the wrong side. You're a lovely woman, but marriage has to offer a man the future he planned for. I felt something in me go still. And if I can't give him that? She adjusted the handle of one shopping bag. A woman who can't give him a family doesn't have much use in his future. Then she asked me to return the antique cake knife Evan's grandmother had given us for the wedding. I shut the door without answering. For a long time, I sat on the floor beside those bags. The condo was so quiet I could hear the kitchen clock from the hallway. I remember hating that sound. My mother arrived around 9 with her spare key. Helen was 68 and already having trouble with her right hip. She found me sitting against the wall and lowered herself carefully into a dining chair. I can't get down there without calling the fire department, she said. So you're going to have to come up here. I almost laughed. Instead, I cried so hard I could not breathe properly. The weeks afterward were ugly in ordinary ways. I made a mistake in an insurance deduction at work and had to stay until nearly 9 correcting payroll for 27 employees. I stopped returning calls from friends because everyone wanted details I could not explain without feeling humiliated. Evan canceled the wedding venue before speaking to me. Judith told people I had hidden my fertility problems until after he proposed. Then Evan said the deposits were not worth fighting over. That sentence finally made me angry. I pulled bank statements, contracts, and email confirmations. I proved exactly what I had paid and demanded my share back. It took 3 weeks and 1 letter from an attorney, but I got every dollar. It was not revenge. It was simply the first time I refused to let Evan decide what I deserved. 6 weeks after the breakup, the fertility clinic called while I was eating lunch at my desk. The nurse said they had been trying to contact Evan about a follow-up consultation. Because of privacy rules, she could not discuss his results with me. Then she asked, "Did Mr. Mercer tell you his testing was complete?" He said everything was normal. There was a pause. Not a dramatic one, just long enough for me to stop chewing. "You should request a full copy of your own chart," she said. After we hung up, I stared at my computer screen and thought about the way Evan had answered in the parking garage. Too fast. For the first time, I wondered whether I had been the only person in that exam room carrying difficult news. I requested my records the next morning. The clinic sent them through a secure portal, 73 pages of lab values, consent forms, insurance codes, and phrases that sounded much colder on paper than they had in the exam room. I read everything twice. Nowhere did it say I was sterile. It said my ovarian reserve was diminished. It said natural conception would be difficult. It said IVF should be discussed because of my age and the partial blockage in my left fallopian tube. Difficult. Reduced. Not impossible. Evan's results were not included, of course. They belonged to him. But one sentence in the physician's notes stayed with me. Male factor findings pending separate consultation. I closed my laptop and sat very still. For 6 weeks, I had been walking around believing my body had ended our engagement. Evan had let me believe it. Worse, he had helped other people believe it too. I wanted to call him immediately. I wanted to ask what he knew and when he knew it. I wanted to hear him stumble over the truth. I wanted Judith to apologize. Instead, I called a fertility center in Cincinnati and scheduled a second opinion. Dr. Anita Shah did not offer miracles. I respected her for that. She reviewed my records, asked about my cycles, and explained that treatment at 41 came with lower success rates and higher risks. She talked about medication, egg retrieval, embryo quality, miscarriage, and cost. Then she folded her hands on the desk. "Nobody should have told you motherhood was impossible," she said. "Difficult, yes. Impossible, no." I cried in the parking lot. Not because she had promised me a baby, she had not. I cried because someone had finally said the truth without using it as a weapon. At first, I wanted to begin treatment immediately. I told myself it was because time mattered, and that was true. But during the required counseling appointment, the therapist asked me a question I did not expect. "If your former fiancé never learned whether treatment worked, would you still want to continue?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. That silence embarrassed me more than I can explain. Part of me wanted a child. I had wanted one for years. But another part wanted proof. Proof that Evan had been wrong. Proof that Judith's verdict had not been final. Proof that I was still a woman with a future. I postponed treatment for 3 months. That was around the time Daniel Reyes came back into my life. I had met him twice before through a school partnership program at work. He was an assistant principal in Westerville, the kind of man who wore practical shoes and kept 2 pens in his shirt pocket because one was always being borrowed. We ran into each other at a CVS on State Street. Both of us reached for the last box of alcohol wipes. "You take them," he said. "You got there first." "I work in a high school. I'm used to losing arguments over supplies." I laughed before I could stop myself. He was buying them for his older sister, who was undergoing chemotherapy. I was buying them because I had not fully given up on treatment. We talked for 5 minutes beside the pharmacy counter. Nothing dramatic happened. He did not ask for my number under fluorescent lights while someone waited behind us with cough syrup. We met again a month later at a community support group. Daniel was there because his wife had died of ovarian cancer 3 years earlier. I was there because my therapist suggested I learn how grief worked before I tried to outrun it. After the meeting, he admitted he still talked to his wife while driving. "I tell her when traffic is bad," he said, as if she can do anything about I-270. I told him I still argued with Evan in the shower. "Do you ever win?" "Always. He's much less convincing when I control both sides." That was how we started. Coffee, breakfast, walks through Sharon Woods when the weather warmed. Once he came with me to take my mother to an orthopedic appointment because her hip pain had gotten worse. He never rushed me. But he also did not flatter me when I needed honesty. The first real fight we had happened after I told him I planned to restart IVF. We were sitting in my car outside a diner in Worthington. The windows had fogged from our coffee. Daniel stared through the windshield for a moment. "Can I ask you something without you getting mad?" That sentence usually means I'm about to get mad. "Do you want a child, or do you want Evan to know he was wrong?" I felt heat rise into my face. "That's insulting." "I'm not trying to insult you. You think I'd bring a child into the world as some kind of revenge project? I think you were hurt badly. Hurt people sometimes confuse healing with winning." I reached for the door handle. He said my name, but I turned back before he could continue. "You don't get to decide why I want to be a mother." "You're right." That didn't sound like agreement. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. "I buried my wife, Claire. I know life is short, but I can't build a family with you if part of you is still trying to prove something to him." I got out of the car and walked 3 blocks home in the cold. We did not speak for nearly 2 weeks. During that time, I went back to counseling and asked myself questions I did not enjoy. Would I continue if treatment failed? Could I accept donor eggs if that became the recommendation? Could I raise a child alone? Was I trying to fill an empty place, or was I prepared to care for a real human being who would not exist to heal me? Eventually, I called Daniel. "I want a child," I told him, "not a witness, not proof, a child." He was quiet. Then he said, "I was afraid you'd never call." "I was afraid you were right." "Those are not the same thing." "No, they're worse." We did not rush after that. We went to counseling together. We talked about money, health, guardianship, my mother, his grief, and whether either of us had enough energy to start over in middle age. We married at the Franklin County Courthouse 10 months later. There were 11 people at lunch afterward at Bob Evans. My mother complained that the biscuits were dry, then ate 2. My first IVF cycle failed. The second produced 2 embryos suitable for transfer. Dr. Shaw warned us carefully about the risks. We chose to transfer both after a long discussion. 1 embryo divided. When the ultrasound showed 3 heartbeats, Daniel made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a cough. Dr. Shaw did not smile. She immediately began explaining preterm birth, blood pressure complications, growth restrictions, and the possibility of a long hospital stay. She was right to be serious. By 29 weeks, my feet were so swollen I wore Daniel's slippers around the house. My hands went numb at night. I had reflux, back pain, and appointments nearly every week. At 32 weeks, I developed dangerous blood pressure and underwent an emergency C-section. Nora, June, and Lucy went straight to the NICU. For weeks, our life was measured in oxygen numbers, feeding tubes, tiny weight gains, and drives to the hospital before sunrise. When we finally brought all 3 girls home, I thought nothing from my old life could reach me there. I was wrong. 4 months later, Evan's wedding invitation arrived. It was for the same Dublin hotel where we had once planned our ceremony. Daniel read the handwritten note and looked at me. "That isn't an invitation," he said. "That's a man asking for an audience." I was about to tear it in half when my phone buzzed. The message came from a woman I had never met. "My name is Lauren Whitmore. I'm marrying Evan. I think he lied to both of us. May I speak with you?" I almost deleted Lauren's message. For 10 minutes, I stared at my phone while June slept across my lap, and Lucy argued with a pacifier she refused to keep in her mouth. Daniel looked over from the dining table where he was paying hospital bills. "You don't have to answer." "I know. You also don't have to fix whatever's happening in their relationship." "I know that too." He nodded once and went back to his calculator. That was one thing I appreciated about Daniel. He never confused support with making decisions for me. I replied with a single sentence. "Where would you like to meet?" 3 days later, I drove to a Panera Bread in Worthington. Lauren was already there. She stood when I walked in, then immediately sat back down like she'd forgotten how chairs worked. She looked nothing like the woman I'd imagined. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't cold. She looked tired. There was a paper coffee cup in front of her that had clearly gone cold. She kept rubbing the edge of a large manila envelope with her thumb, but never opened it. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. I almost didn't. I probably wouldn't have either. For a few awkward seconds, neither of us knew where to begin. Finally, she took a slow breath. "My fiancé says you're obsessed with him." "That must be disappointing," I said. "I haven't thought about him nearly as much as he thinks." The corner of her mouth almost smiled. Almost. Then she reached into the envelope and slid a folded invoice across the table. It was from the same fertility clinic. Evan's name was printed at the top. "I found this while we were moving into our house," she said. "What did he tell you?" "He said it was routine testing. Then he said the clinic mixed up paperwork. Then he said you stole private information." She looked directly at me. "His story changes every time I ask." I nodded slowly. "That sounds familiar?" Lauren wasn't looking for gossip. That became obvious within minutes. She never asked what Evan's diagnosis was. She never asked whether he could father children. Instead, she asked something much simpler. "Did he blame everything on you?" The question hung between us. "Yes." She closed her eyes for a second. "My doctor suggested we both repeat fertility testing before starting treatment." "And?" He refused. "What reason did he give?" "He said I was almost 40 and we should start with me." She laughed once. It wasn't amusement. It sounded like someone dropping a plate that had already been cracked. "I've had blood drawn 4 times in 6 months," she said. "Ultrasounds, hormone panels, every appointment. I went alone because he was always busy." I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt sorry for her. Another part wanted to protect myself. "I can't tell you anything about Evan's medical records." "I don't want you to." She looked me straight in the eye. "I just need to know whether he lied to me about you." That was different. I unlocked my phone. The first thing I showed her wasn't a text message. It was my own medical summary from Dr. Shaw. She read silently. Reduced ovarian reserve. Recommended IVF. No statement saying pregnancy was impossible. Lauren looked up. "So, you weren't sterile?" "No." "And he knew that?" "He was sitting next to me." Then I opened the old text thread I'd never been able to delete. I handed her the phone. She read one message. Then another. "Mom thinks it's better if people believe you hid it." A few lines later, "No woman wants to marry a man with fertility issues. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Lauren kept staring at the screen. "I was hoping these weren't real." "They're real." She handed the phone back without another word. For almost a minute, we simply listened to the espresso machine behind the counter. Finally, she spoke. "I've asked him about these things." "What did he say?" "That you edited messages." I almost laughed. That's creative. He also told me you'd probably try to stop the wedding. I didn't even know your last name until your text. Lauren nodded. I believe that now. She explained what had happened over the previous month. Every time she questioned Evan, his explanation shifted. First, he'd claimed he had never needed fertility testing. Then he admitted there had been one appointment. Then he insisted the results had been completely normal. When Lauren asked why he wouldn't repeat testing, he became angry and accused her of not trusting him. Judith only made things worse. She called me 3 different times, Lauren said. What did she say? She said you were emotionally unstable. I couldn't help smiling. That one's new. She told me you couldn't accept that Evan had moved on. I stirred my coffee slowly. Did she also tell you I trapped him into proposing? Lauren blinked. No. She told one of my co-workers that. Lauren sighed. I don't know what to believe anymore. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said the only thing I knew for certain. You don't need to believe me. She frowned. You need to decide whether you trust the man you're about to marry. When we stood to leave, I assumed that was the end of it. It wasn't. Claire? I turned. Lauren took a deep breath. I haven't canceled the wedding. I waited. I want to ask him one more time. In private? Yes. That seems reasonable. If he tells me the truth, nobody else ever has to know. I respected that. She wasn't trying to humiliate him. She was trying to save her own future. But, she continued, if he lies again, would you come? I stared at her. To the wedding? To the hotel. Why? Because I think he'll say you're making everything up. I folded my arms. You don't need me to prove he's lying. No. She shook her head. I need someone there who can tell me I'm not losing my mind. That sentence stayed with me the entire drive home. Daniel was unloading groceries when I pulled into the driveway. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned against the kitchen counter. She sounds scared. She does. Are you going? I don't know. He nodded. Good. I laughed. You're happy I don't know? I'd be worried if you decided too quickly. The decision was made for me 2 days later. Judith called. I almost ignored it. Curiosity won. Claire, she said sweetly, I'm so glad you answered. I doubt that. I wanted to make sure you received the invitation. I did. I certainly hope there are no hard feelings. There it was. The voice she'd always used at charity luncheons. Soft enough to sound kind. Sharp enough to draw blood. I'll think about attending. Oh, I hope you do. She paused. One suggestion. Yes? You might feel more comfortable wearing something dark. I frowned. Why? They're usually a bit more forgiving. She let the sentence hang there. As women get older, my hand tightened around the phone. She wasn't finished. The photographer has been told to capture candid reactions during the ceremony. Those always become everyone's favorite pictures. There it was. Not an invitation. A performance. She wanted photographs of me sitting alone while Evan married someone else. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen without moving. Daniel looked over. She made up your mind, didn't she? I nodded slowly. Yes. The week before the wedding turned into complete chaos. June developed an ear infection. Lucy dumped an entire bottle across the diaper bag. Daniel strained his shoulder, lifting the double stroller into the SUV. I tried on 3 dresses that no longer fit after the pregnancy. One wouldn't zip. One pressed painfully against my C-section scar. The third had a milk stain that refused to come out. Finally, I bought a simple navy wrap dress at Macy's. Nothing fancy. Just comfortable enough to carry babies. The morning of the wedding, I sat in the hotel parking lot with my hand still on the ignition. I don't think I can do this, I whispered. Daniel looked at me. We can go home. We really can? We can order pizza. I smiled weakly. And never speak of these people again. He nodded. Then he added quietly, but don't let fear make the decision for you. I sat there another minute. Finally, I opened the car door. We walked into the hotel lobby together. Daniel pushed the stroller. I carried Lucy. Nora had somehow kicked off one tiny shoe before we even reached the entrance. Across the marble lobby, Evan stood halfway down the grand staircase talking with two guests. He looked up. His smile disappeared. Judith grabbed the railing. At that exact moment, the bridal suite door opened. Lauren stepped out wearing her wedding gown. She saw me. Then she looked at my daughters. For a second, she simply closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she said quietly, "He told me you wouldn't come." I met her gaze. He's been wrong before. The ballroom did not go silent all at once. It happened in pieces. A woman near the guest book stopped mid-sentence. Two men by the bar turned their heads. Someone lowered a champagne glass without taking a sip. Then the whispering spread across the room like a breeze moving through tall grass. Daniel pushed the stroller beside me. Nora was missing one shoe. June had a pink pacifier clipped crookedly to her dress. Lucy was chewing the corner of the wedding program with both hands. I had imagined this entrance too many times during the drive. In some versions, I walked in perfectly composed, my dress fitting like it had been made for me. In others, Evan took one look at the girls and immediately understood everything he had lost. The reality was less polished. My hair had started to frizz from the July humidity. There was dried formula near the hem of my navy dress, and I could feel my compression garment rolling down beneath it. I looked like what I was. A 43-year-old mother of premature triplets who had slept 4 hours and nearly stayed home. Evan crossed the lobby before Lauren could reach us. His face had gone pale, but his voice was controlled. "What are you doing here?" I looked at him. "You invited me." His eyes moved from my face to Daniel, then to the stroller. "You brought 3 babies to my wedding?" The invitation said families were welcome. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. "You think this is going to make me jealous?" "No, Evan." I adjusted Lucy against my hip. "I brought my family because you invited us." His jaw tightened. Then he looked at the girls again. "They're yours?" The question was so blunt that Daniel took half a step forward. I touched his arm. "Yes," I said, "they're mine." "All 3. That is generally what triplets means." Daniel coughed into his hand to cover a laugh. Evan did not find it funny. "How?" I stared at him. "Their medical history is none of your business." Judith had reached us by then. Her eyes went directly to the babies. "Were donor eggs involved?" she asked. There was no greeting, no congratulations, not even an attempt to pretend she was being polite. I looked at her carefully. That question is exactly why I should never have let you define me. For once, Judith had no immediate response. Lauren stepped forward. Her hands were clasped tightly at her waist. "Evan," she said, "we need to talk before the ceremony." "We already talked." "No, you explained. I asked questions. Those are not the same thing." Her father, Robert Whitmore, appeared behind her. He was a broad-shouldered man in his early 60s with silver hair and the expression of someone who had already heard more than he liked. The wedding officiant joined them, still holding his folder. Lauren led Evan into a small conference room beside the ballroom. Robert and the officiant followed. I stayed in the hallway with Daniel and the girls. "This may still end quietly," Daniel said. "I hope it does." And I meant it. I had not come to watch a woman's wedding collapse. I had come because she had asked for the truth before making the same mistake I once had. Through the closed door, I could hear voices, but not words. Then Evan's voice rose. The door opened sharply. He came into the hallway first. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You dragged my ex-fiancé here because you decided not to trust me." Lauren followed. "I gave you 4 chances to tell me the truth." "I did tell you the truth." "You said you were never tested." "I said the testing wasn't relevant." "You said it never happened." "I said Claire exaggerated it." He looked at me. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" Several guests had moved closer to the hallway. The conversations inside the ballroom had stopped. I shifted Lucy higher on my hip. "I wanted you to tell the truth 2 years ago." Evan pointed toward me. "She edited those messages." Lauren's face changed. Not dramatically. It simply became still. "Open your phone," she said. "What?" "Show me the conversation." "I changed phones." "Your messages are backed up." "I deleted them." "Why?" "Because I don't keep old conversations with women I'm no longer with." His voice was loud enough now that people near the ballroom doors could hear every word. Daniel leaned toward me. "Do you want to leave?" I looked at Evan standing there in his tuxedo, still trying to turn me into the problem. "Not while he's telling my story for me." Lauren walked to the microphone stand near the front of the ballroom. She did not climb onto the stage or demand everyone's attention. She simply picked up the microphone because the room had become too crowded and confused for private explanations. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The ceremony is being delayed." A few guests shifted in their seats. Lauren continued. "There is information Evan withheld from me about the family we were planning. I asked him privately, more than once." Evan stepped beside her. "This is a misunderstanding." Lauren looked at me. I took out my phone and walked forward. I did not give a speech. I opened the old message thread and handed the phone to her. She read the first line aloud. "Mom thinks it's better if people believe you hid it." A murmur moved through the room. Then she read the second. "No woman wants to marry a man with fertility issues. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Evan's face darkened. "Those messages are out of context." Robert spoke from behind him. "What context makes either of those statements acceptable?" Evan did not answer. Judith stood abruptly. "The clinic made far too much of one bad sample." The room became completely still. Lauren turned toward her. "You told me he had never been tested." Judith's mouth opened, then closed. "It was inconclusive. You said there was no test." Evan was under tremendous stress at the time. Lauren's voice remained quiet. "Then why did he ask me to undergo months of testing while refusing to repeat his own?" Judith's patience finally broke. "Because you're nearly 40, it made sense to begin with you." Robert took one step forward. "Did you intend to let my daughter believe the problem was hers?" "There were options," Judith said. "Donors, procedures. There was no need to burden Lauren before the wedding." That was the moment everything changed. Lauren looked at Evan, not at his mother. "You were going to let me go through treatment I might not need." Evan shook his head. "We would have figured it out." "After I married you?" "It wasn't certain." "That wasn't your decision to make for me." I stepped closer, though my knees had begun to ache. "His diagnosis was never the shameful part," I said. "Mine wasn't either." Evan looked away. "The shame was letting everyone believe my body was the reason he left because he was afraid of what his own test might mean." I turned to Judith. "You called me useless because you thought I couldn't give your son a child, but you were willing to let another woman carry the same blame just to protect him." Then I looked at Evan. "You didn't leave because I was infertile. You left because telling the truth frightened you more than hurting me." Lauren reached up and removed her veil. She did not throw it. She folded it once and placed it on a chair. "I can handle a medical problem," she said. "I cannot marry a man who makes women carry his fear for him." Then she took off her ring. "The wedding is over." Robert asked Evan and Judith to leave. Evan started arguing about deposits and contracts. Judith rose too quickly, her knee locked, and she stumbled against the chair. Without thinking, I caught her by the elbow. She stared at me, humiliated. "I won't let you fall," I said quietly. "That doesn't mean I'll let you hurt me again." Behind us, Lucy grabbed a dinner roll from Daniel's plate and threw it. It landed directly in a champagne glass near Evan. Daniel leaned close to me. "That one has your timing." I watched the roll slowly absorb the champagne. "Unfortunately, she has your aim." A few guests laughed. The tension broke just enough for people to breathe again. The Whitmores decided to serve dinner since it had already been paid for, though nobody knew where to sit. Before we left, Lauren approached me with a small velvet box. Inside was a silver baby cup engraved with the words, "For our future firstborn." "He ordered it before he agreed to take another test," she said. I closed the box and placed it back in her hands. "That belongs to whatever you decide comes next," I told her, "not to me." People imagine that after a moment like that, your life changes overnight. It doesn't. The drive home was almost completely silent. Daniel kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting lightly on the center console. The girls had fallen asleep before we reached Interstate 270. The stroller rattled softly in the back every time we hit a seam in the pavement. I stared out the passenger window at familiar exits. Worthington. Westerville. Home. I thought I would feel victorious. Instead, I felt tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. When we pulled into the driveway, Daniel carried June inside first. I took Nora. Lucy stayed asleep in her car seat until he came back for her. We moved through the house almost without speaking. Warm bottles. Fresh diapers. Tiny pajamas. The ordinary work of loving 3 babies. After everyone was settled, I walked into the laundry room. There was a basket of clean towels waiting to be folded. I sat down on an upside-down bucket beside the washing machine. Then I cried. Not because I still loved Evan. That chapter had ended long before. I cried because for nearly 2 years, a small part of me had believed everything he and Judith had said. That I had failed. That my body had made me less valuable. That every woman younger than me automatically had something I didn't. Those lies had lived inside me far longer than either of them deserved. A few minutes later, the laundry room door opened. Daniel didn't ask what was wrong. He simply handed me a mug of peppermint tea. "I've got the girls," he said. "You don't have to." "I know." He smiled gently. "But I want to." After he left, I sat there another 10 minutes until I could breathe normally again. The weeks after the canceled wedding were surprisingly ordinary. Lauren officially ended the engagement. Her father helped recover part of the wedding costs through cancellation agreements and vendor credits. She moved into a small apartment closer to her physical therapy clinic and sent me one short text. "Thank you for answering a stranger." I replied, "Take good care of yourself." That was the last conversation we had. We never became close friends. Life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes 2 people simply help each other survive the same storm before walking in different directions. A few mutual acquaintances called to apologize. One admitted she had believed Judith's version from the beginning. "I should have asked you," she said. "You could have," I answered. Others never apologized. Some quietly decided I had embarrassed Evan on purpose. I stopped worrying about changing their minds. Not every misunderstanding deserves another explanation. Evan sent exactly one message. It arrived just after 10 one evening while I was rocking Lucy back to sleep. "You destroyed my future just to prove you could have children." I looked at the screen for a long time. At first I typed 3 paragraphs. I erased them. Then I wrote one sentence. "I didn't destroy your future. I stopped helping you hide from it. Please don't contact me again." I blocked his number before he could answer. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't wonder whether I had been too harsh. Boundaries always sounded rude to people who benefited from having none. Life settled into something wonderfully unremarkable. Daniel's shoulder healed slowly after physical therapy. My wrists still hurt from lifting babies all day. The girls reached milestones one at a time. Nora studied every new face before deciding whether it deserved a smile. June laughed at ceiling fans, grocery store lights, and once at a potato sitting on the kitchen counter for reasons only she understood. Lucy remained convinced gravity was optional. If something fit into her hands, she threw it. Spoons. Blocks. Socks. Daniel joked that she was training for the major leagues. Hospital bills still arrived. One of the girls needed extra physical therapy because she'd been born early. Sleep came in small pieces instead of full nights. Sometimes Daniel and I argued over ridiculous things. Who forgot to buy formula? Whose turn it was to wash bottles? Whether we'd already paid the electric bill. One evening, we spent 20 minutes searching the house for my glasses before discovering they were sitting on top of my own head. Middle age didn't disappear because life became happier. Neither did ordinary stress. My mother finally had her hip replaced that autumn. For 6 weeks, she stayed with us during recovery. She insisted her walker was the Cadillac of orthopedic equipment. Then she tied colorful ribbons to it so the girls would stop trying to chew on the tennis balls covering the back legs. One afternoon, I found Helen slowly racing the walker across the living room while June squealed with laughter from her playmat. "I believe I'm winning," my mother announced. "Against who?" I asked. "Arthritis." That answer felt exactly like something she would say. On the girl's first birthday, our backyard filled with folding chairs, paper lanterns, and more family than I realized we still had. Daniel grilled hamburgers. Helen supervised from a lawn chair whether anyone asked her to or not. The girls destroyed their tiny birthday cakes with astonishing efficiency. Later that evening, while cleaning the kitchen, I opened the junk drawer looking for scissors. Evan's wedding invitation was still there. I had forgotten about it. The cream-colored envelope looked strangely small now. I unfolded the card. At the bottom was his handwritten message. "I hope you finally learned to be happy for other people." I smiled. Not because it was funny, because I realized he had accidentally given me the answer. Happiness had never come from watching his life fall apart. It came from standing in my own kitchen listening to 3 little girls laugh while Daniel argued with my mother over whether hot dogs counted as leftovers. I carried the invitation to the recycling bin. Daniel looked up from loading the dishwasher. "You keeping that?" I dropped it into the bin. "No. You sure?" I nodded. "I don't need reminders anymore." He smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Before going to bed, I stood for a moment outside the girls' bedroom. 3 cribs. 3 steady little breaths. 3 futures that belonged to them, not to my past. Looking back now, I don't think revenge gave me peace. The truth did. Evan's medical diagnosis never made him a bad man. Mine never made me a lesser woman. What broke us wasn't infertility. It was fear, pride, and the decision to protect one person's image by sacrificing someone else's dignity. If you've ever had someone use your hardest season to define your worth, I hope you eventually found the courage to tell your own story instead. Sometimes healing doesn't begin when the world believes you. It begins when you stop believing the lies that were told about you.